Discover how a poor widow and her kids genuinely saved a dying cowboy, transforming their lives. The dust hung heavy in the air, as suffocating as the weight of Sarah's daily battles. Each hour at the ranch dragged, the sun clawing relentlessly at the land around her, just as memories of her late husband gnawed at the corners of her mind. She had been a vibrant woman once, laughter spilling from her lips like water from a spring. But grief had choked that joy out, leaving behind a barren expanse where hope used to reside. The bills piled up, each envelope another reminder of her position, a widow with 2 children wrestling against fate. Emily and Jake needed more than their mother's love. They needed stability, a future. Struggling to keep the ranch, a legacy, and now a burden, Sarah felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. The rusted fence cried for repairs, but what money did she have for that? It clung to her mind like thorns, each reminder a prick of despair. The neighbors had begun to retreat, their eyes glazed over with the anxiety of their own circumstances. What could they spare when their own every resource was stretched taut? Sarah thought of her husband, of the dreams they had nourished together. She could still hear his voice encouraging her, but now it felt like a whisper over the roar of a storm brewing just beyond her horizon. Before she could dwell too long on that tempest, urgency surged through her as another day unfolded with its promises of toil. A broken water line demanded her attention, near bursting with every passing moment, each drop a reminder of her own flaws and failures. "It's just a simple fix," she told herself, the words tasting bitter as they escaped her lips. But no sooner had she begun to dig into the dry earth when a distant shout pierced the heavy air. It wasn't long before Emily's and Jake's wide eyes caught sight of the limp form at the edge of their property. A cowboy, sprawled on the ground, the shadows of struggle etched on his face. "Mom, look!" Jake's voice cracked, panic infusing his tone. Sarah's heart raced. Should she hesitate? The instinct to help pushed forward, like an echo of her late husband's morals. With trembling hands, she began to drag him back again, hoping desperately. She knew she was taking a gamble, risking the remnants of resources they barely scraped together. "We can't just leave him here," she whispered, as the weight of his body pulled against her. In the back of her mind, doubts clawed at her. What if he brings more trouble? What if he couldn't be saved? But the warmth of her children's concerned gazes pulled her focus back to the present. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days unfurled into tense weeks as the cowboy Jack resided in their modest living room. He shared tales of rodeos and friendships, but the core of his truths reflected too closely her own: loss, betrayal, dreams crushed under the weight of harsh realities. Uncertainty brewed within her. Could he be trusted? The faintest flicker of independence ignited in him as he healed. But could she afford to let him into her life, her crumbling world? And what lay outside? Talk of developers clawing at the edges of their community loomed above them, threatening everything she had left. With thunder rolling in the distance, Sarah felt the pang of decisions weighing heavy on her chest. Would she let this man help her, risking her heart anew, or was it safer to retreat behind the shards of her painful past? Each day felt like a tightrope walk, an unsteady balancing act between fear of the future and the flickering flame of hope that danced just beyond reach. Staring at the stormy horizon, she realized all too clearly, something had to give. And as she looked at her children's eager expressions, ready to seize every spark of courage, she knew she stood at the precipice of change, both terrifying and exhilarating. The days shifted into a rhythm of trials and subtle triumphs that felt foreign to Sarah. Jack's presence loomed large, sparking a mix of gratitude and apprehension within her. He was healing, slowly shedding the layers of vulnerability he wore like a shroud. She watched his eyes flicker alive whenever he shared stories of courage and adventure, a stark contrast to the ghost of her own enthusiasm, long since faded. As Jack regained strength, he began to help with odd tasks around the ranch, fixing fences, helping with chores, and even playing with Emily and Jake. His laughter, though tinged with sadness, began to fill their home, weaving through its worn walls like the gentle wind that swept across the plains outside. A strange camaraderie blossomed between Sarah and Jack, yet each laugh reminded her of her husband's absence, causing her heart to tighten momentarily with loss and guilt. One afternoon, while kneeling beside the crumbling fence, Sarah formulated a plan to repair more than just the wood. She needed a chance to confront her own fears. She gathered the raw materials she could afford, a mix of salvaged wood and nails, hoping to reinforce the boundaries of her property and her resolve. Jack joined her, commitment igniting behind his gaze. He worked alongside her as they discussed the future, bouncing ideas back and forth that seemed to spark something deep within her. The more they discussed, the more tangible her dreams felt, like the possibility of forging a life richer and more fulfilling than mere survival. "Why don't we host a small fundraiser for the ranch?" Jack suggested one evening. "You need support, and I need to prove I'm not just dead weight." The thought was both tantalizing and terrifying. To open up her life to neighbors and acquaintances meant risking vulnerability in ways she had mostly avoided. But there was a compelling surge of defiance in his proposal, a push against the constraints that had held her tightly bound for so long. The idea took root, and with it her determination firmed. They spent evenings drafting plans, compiling lists of supplies, and reaching out to those who might help. Sarah felt the heaviness of isolation beginning to lift, her fears soothed by the excitement of possibility. The overflowing sting of her past intertwined with the potential of the new. Yet as she began to envision a practical transformation, remnants of doubt whispered from the shadows of her mind. Could she really trust Jack? Was she placing her hope in a mirage, an illusion of connection that could shatter with a single misstep? And amidst the bubbling excitement of the impending fundraiser, the looming threat of developers closing in on their land sent a fresh wave of anxiety crashing over her. One evening, while gazing out at the stars dusting the dark blanket of sky above, Sarah found herself torn between past pains and future hopes. Memories surged unbidden, her husband's wise counsel to cherish the transformative power of community, even when it felt too risky. "What the hell are we afraid of?" she murmured to the night. Seeking certainty in uncertainty, she hesitated but for a moment. Could this journey lead to the sense of belonging and purpose that had evaded her for far too long? As the days crawled forward and the plans took shape, she felt a stirring within her, a call to put herself at the forefront of her life. With an inner strength she had forgotten existed, Sarah prepared to confront not only the fears of inviting the world in, but also the chance of losing control yet again. As the sun set on another day filled with promise, she felt the heat of resolve burning in her chest. One thing was clear: the moment to confront her own narrative held equally as much weight as the need to reclaim her dreams. And as Jack approached with tentative assurance, the threshold of their new reality hung tantalizingly within reach, a crossroads of existence and choice. What would happen when she finally leaned into that promise? Would it be the catalyst she needed to reclaim her life, or would it become another chapter written in heartache? The morning light shattered through the kitchen window, dragging Sarah from the depths of her sleep. The air felt charged, as if the weight of anticipation was pressing against her chest. Today marked the beginning of their venture to open the ranch to the community, a dream she had nurtured like a fragile seed. It was her chance to stand in the light of her own existence, to shatter the molds that had confined her for years. In the kitchen, the clatter of dishes harmonized with her racing thoughts. Could she really do this? Reaching for a few eggs, she held them in trembling hands. They were fragile, yet full of potential, much like her own aspirations. With a firm resolve, she cracked each one into a sizzling pan, the sound echoing her determination. She might have felt vulnerable, like a fool inviting others to witness her pain, but today she would refuse to shy away from that risk. As she layered the thoughts of the day ahead with the scent of breakfast, Jack appeared, his tousled hair catching the morning light. He stretched lazily, yet held a spark of energy within him, one she suddenly felt jealous of. "Ready?" he asked with a crooked grin, yet Sarah couldn't mask the wave of anxiety that crashed over her. "I don't know," she admitted, dropping her gaze to the pan, wrestling with an internal tempest. "What if no one shows up? What if it all falls flat?" "Then we try again," Jack stated, matter-of-factly, his gaze steady. "You won't know unless you step outside those walls." His certainty stung, forcing her to confront the stagnant air of her comfort zone. She was so afraid of failure that it paralyzed her. They finished breakfast, each bite becoming a morsel of courage, steadily growing in her spirit. As the sun climbed higher, she dressed with purpose, choosing a vibrant blouse that felt like a declaration against the muted shadows of her past. She caught her reflection in the mirror, expecting to see a stranger stare back. Instead, she saw resilience. The morning passed in a blur of activity, and soon the first car rolled into the driveway. Her heart raced as she recognized the faces of neighbors and acquaintances, people she had kept at arm's length, unwilling to let the emptiness of her heart spill over. They entered, each greeting a reminder of the connections she had neglected. Sarah moved with the grace of someone stepping onto a tightrope. One miscalculation could send her tumbling. She faked smiles to mask her anxiety while greeting each guest, her hands shaking slightly around the tray she carried. Conversations unfolded around her, and slowly the hush of expectation began to morph into laughter and chatter. "Hey, this isn't half bad," Jack remarked, his eyes twinkling as he engaged with a group. In that moment, a realization washed over her. The interaction and the presence of others were threads weaving a tapestry she thought had frayed. Sarah allowed herself to join in, drawing from their warmth, and each conversation veered closer to what she had once dreamed of: collaboration, camaraderie, and connection. Yet, despite the ever-growing crowd, an unsettling itch tugged at her. A gnawing question of trust and lost control simmered. Beneath the surface, what if they discovered her vulnerability? What if an impending storm of sadness crashed against the fragile facade she was so determined to build? In a quiet corner, Sarah's eyes caught a glimpse of Jack, deep in discussion with an elderly neighbor. The shadows of his past were flickering away, the man she once knew evolving in the face of community. He had taken responsibility for his healing, and in doing so, perhaps inspired her to face her own fears head-on. It ignited something deep within her, a flicker of ambition she had shunned. But just as she began to breathe easier, a slick businessman, one she recognized as a developer, strolled onto the ranch grounds, surveying the landscape with a calculating gaze. Fear thudded loudly in her chest. What did he want? Would he succeed where others failed, severing the ties to her past, her land, and all that had become her essence? As her heart raced, a quivering resolve filled her. The moment was here. Would she confront this new threat, armed with the strength she had been discovering, or fall back into the shadows she'd worked to escape? The stakes had risen, and she sensed an intersection of dreams and nightmares looming closer than ever. The time had come to face the uncertainty head-on and seize the potential that now felt so closely within grasp. Sensing the weight of the developer's gaze, Sarah's pulse quickened, each thump hammering against her rib cage. He moved with the confident precision of someone who had orchestrated plans that could shift the very fabric of the land she called home. She had to act, but first a wave of doubt washed over her. Was she prepared for the confrontation? Did she have the fortitude to protect the ranch, her sanctuary? Drawing a deep breath, she felt the air filling her lungs, filling the void left by uncertainty. It was in this moment of inhalation, the essence of her space, that she promised herself she would no longer shrink away from her fears. She had spent too long giving way to shadows. This was her land, her dreams, and her fight. "Excuse me," Sarah said to a nearby guest who was in mid-conversation. "I need to take care of something." She broke away from the group with resolve and maneuvered toward the tall figure standing amidst a lively commotion. Jack caught her eye, sensing her shift in energy. "Sarah," he mouthed, his brow furrowing with concern. With determination solidifying her steps, she approached the developer. He turned, an eyebrow raised, as if surprised by her audacity. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth yet condescending. "Actually, yes. You can tell me why you're here," she responded, her voice steadier than she felt inside. Every fiber of her being screamed to retreat, yet she stood firm. "This ranch is not for sale, and neither are our dreams." The man smiled, a thin, veiled approach, easing into an aggressive stance. "That's a bold statement for someone unprepared." His words dripped with skepticism. "I might be unprepared, but I'm not powerless." It surprised her how conviction curled her lips into defiance. "We're turning this ranch into something meaningful. It's our home, our legacy." He slanted his head, intrigued but dismissive. "Tangible value is determined by profit, Sarah. Emotional connections don't pay the bills." Emotions shifted inside her, boiling with urgency. She wasn't merely fighting for a place, she was defending fragments of herself she had long neglected. "You don't know what this place is worth, do you? It's more than land. It feeds families, nurtures community, and fosters healing. You can't measure that in dollars." His smirk faltered for a fleeting moment, hinting at uncertainty. Perhaps her words struck a nerve. Sarah pressed on, the effort to protect the ranch weaving threads of fortitude around her spine. "For too long, I let others define my worth and my choices, but that stops now." The developer's gaze narrowed. "If you're trying to win me over, it'll take more than passion." "Then let's make this clear. If you're here to tear down what we've built, you'll find a fight on your hands." Her voice had risen, but the tension ignited a fire within her. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around her faded into a blur, the laughter and chatter muted by the pulse of adrenaline surging through her. She felt vulnerable, yet empowered, a dance with fear that ignited her spirit. Angling back, the developer's mask slipped further, revealing bemusement. "I'll be watching, Sarah. Just remember that the game is bigger than you think." As he stepped away, the powerful grip of his earlier confidence was replaced by her daring challenge. She realized her battle had not only been against him, but with herself. Each heartbeat echoed the realization that she had made an undeniable mark. She was not merely reclaiming her land, she was reclaiming her life. Jack stepped beside her, pride glowing in his eyes. "That was impressive. You stood your ground." "I didn't think I had it in me," she replied, breathless. But as she surveyed the room filled with her friends and neighbors, a clarity enveloped her. This was her turning point, a canvas where she could sketch out her dreams. Yet, as satisfaction swelled within her, an unwelcome fear pricked through. What if the developer brought back reinforcements? Or worse, what if the foundation of her newfound confidence crumbled? The stakes were rising, and within her a blend of anticipation and anxiety swirled. She needed a strategy that could protect what mattered most to her. Could she sustain this growth and prove that her dreams could withstand pressure? The next chapter loomed, and with it, the battle had only just begun. Sarah leaned heavily against the wooden railing outside the venue, the stars above twinkling like scattered diamonds in a vast ocean of darkness. She closed her eyes, taking a moment to gather her thoughts, the events of the evening swirling like a tempest in her mind. It was as if the confrontation with the developer had ignited a dormant fire within her. But now that the adrenaline was waning, the intensity of her insecurities crawled back, wrapping around her like a suffocating blanket. "Sarah?" Jack's voice cut through her silence, drawing her gaze. He stepped closer, the warmth of his presence a comfort. "Are you okay?" "I just need to think," she sighed, pushing back the tumult of self-doubt. She could feel Jack's concern, but was determined to not let it derail her focus. She wasn't merely standing for the ranch. Today was the day she took control of her narrative. "Have you considered what your next steps are?" His genuine tone softened the weight of uncertainty pressing against her chest. "I have," she replied, nodding slightly, inner resolve solidifying. "I need to gather support from the community, not just the neighbors, but also local businesses and organizations that value what we stand for." "That's smart," Jack encouraged, but concern still clouded his eyes. "Just be careful how you approach this. The developer isn't going to back down easily. He's going to come at you harder now." His words hit her like a jolt of electricity. She had torn a curtain away, exposing not just her vulnerability, but also her strength. She crossed her arms, lifting her chin slightly. "I won't shy away from this. I've let fear dictate my life for too long. It's time I confronted not just him, but everything holding me back." In that moment, clarity washed over her, illuminating lingering insecurities with the blush of powerful determination. She had spent years crippled by doubt, but standing here, with millions of stars as witness, she could feel a profound change beginning to pulse through her. She realized she had to embrace not only the risk, but also the fight within herself. "The next step," she continued, strategizing aloud, "is creating a compelling narrative about the ranch. I want to showcase its importance to our lives and the community." Jack nodded, a spark of admiration lighting in his eyes. "You'd be surprised how much people want to feel a part of something bigger than themselves. You have a powerful story, Sarah." The thought sent a thrilling shiver down her spine. Perhaps it was time to show the world that this ranch wasn't merely a plot of land. It was a legacy. She needed to articulate how it birthed not only a way of life, but joy and connection among those who lived there. "And I want to gather testimonials, the families who have thrived here, the kids who found solace, the elders who've shared their wisdom." Her mind buzzed with ideas, painting vivid images of shared experiences. "Let's harness that passion," Jack grinned, the worry in his eyes giving way to hope. "Organize meetings with the community, schedule interviews with local news. Bring their stories to light. It'll bring more support." Sarah felt a swell of gratitude. Here was a friend who believed in her, who nurtured the raw embers of her resolve into a fire that could burn brightly, illuminating the darkness. "I can do this," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Yet as the plans took shape, the specter of the developer loomed in the back of her mind. What strategies did he have up his sleeve? What moves would he counter with? The uncertainty gnawed at her, fueling both dread and anticipation. "This battle isn't over," she affirmed, her voice tightening with acknowledgement of the daunting road ahead. "But it's one I intend to win." And as they walked back inside, the hum of the crowd growing louder, she felt the weight of her commitment shift from a burden to a potent energy. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had her conviction. In the midst of laughter and casual conversations, a singular thought pierced through the noise. Her journey to reclaim her life had just begun. But how do you prepare for the unknown risks that lay ahead?
The cool night air enveloped Sarah as she stepped back inside, her resolve hardening with each passing moment. A swirl of voices filled the venue, laughter punctuating the conversations of friends and acquaintances. Yet within her, the flickering fire of determination outshone the ambient noise. She drew a deep breath, centering herself as she navigated the crowd, seeking familiar faces infused with support. Her mind raced with thoughts of the developer, a looming figure reminiscent of chaos and greed. The dream of preserving the ranch was not merely a matter of property, it had transformed into a personal crusade. As she eyed local business owners, vibrant personalities animatedly discussing their successes and struggles, a pulse of energy emanated from her core. Behind every kind word exchanged, every success shared, was a story she wanted to tell, a narrative that reflected their intertwined lives and the values they cherished. "Sarah," a voice called out, and she turned to find Tom, the owner of the local hardware store. Known for his gruff demeanor softened by an underlying kindness, he waved her over, urgency in his movements. "Hey, Tom, everything okay?" she asked as she approached. "Not really," he replied, shifting slightly, discomfort shadowing his face. "I heard about that developer. You really want to take him on." "Yes, I do," Sarah answered, her voice unwavering. A deep sigh escaped Tom's lips. "I'm not so sure it's worth the fight. Those guys have money and power. You don't want to create more problems for yourself." His words triggered doubt, a fleeting reminder of past hesitations. Yet within her, determination flicked like a match against kindling. Sarah realized this was exactly the attitude she had to confront. "It's worth it to me, Tom. This ranch is worth every bit of pushback I might face," she declared, the firmness of her words surprising even herself. "Imagine what we'd lose if we let him tear it
All down for profit." The older man's eyes softened, recognizing her bravery layered under a facade of worry. "You're strong, kid. Just promise me you'll be careful." "Absolutely. I plan to gather support from people like you who cherish this place." Her heart raced at the thought of rallying their shared history into a narrative compelling enough to foster loyalty and action. As the night unfolded, Sarah spoke with more people, each encounter shaping her resolve into an ironclad promise. She detailed her vision for the ranch to Mia, a local teacher whose students had often found respite there. Excitement sparkled in Mia's eyes as she agreed to help with organizing testimonials from community members. Making these connections began feeling less like an uphill battle and more like planting seeds. It wasn't just about the ranch anymore. It was about community strength, resilience, and pushing back against the fears that plagued her for far too long. The nights that followed were a blur of planning and strategizing. Sarah immersed herself in crafting outreach letters, driven not merely by survival, but by an exploding passion. With Jack's help, she compiled an agenda for community meetings and reached out to local media, preparing to share a story that would resonate beyond her personal stakes. However, amid this whirlwind of activity, flashes of doubt occasionally passed through her mind like storm clouds. What if she failed? What if the developer had more power than she anticipated? Her hands trembled when these thoughts emerged, prompting her to take deliberate, steady breaths. "You're doing this not just for yourself, but for everyone who has a stake in the ranch," she reminded herself, gathering her courage anew. With each small victory, a supportive email from a local politician, a promise from a business owner to attend the first meeting, her confidence grew further still. Yet, as Sarah lay in bed one evening, staring at the ceiling, an unsettling thought gnawed at her resolve. What if the developer had already begun to put his own plans into motion? As the shadows crept across the room, she felt a sharp stir of anxiety. The battle was truly just beginning, and she had yet to face the real confrontation looming on the horizon. A sudden thought crystallized in her mind. Determination melded with urgency. It was time to unearth everything she could about the developer's intentions. The face-off would come soon, and she needed to arm herself with knowledge to combat the inevitable storm. Tomorrow she would dig deeper. Every piece of information gained could mean the difference between victory and defeat. Steeling herself against the uncertainty, Sarah whispered into the stillness of the night, "I will not let this slip away." The devil was in the details, and she was prepared to uncover them. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the ranch as Sarah prepared herself for a day that felt heavier than the last. Today wasn't just about gathering information, it was about taking initiative and confronting the looming threat head-on. The coffee brewed in the kitchen, filling the air with a sense of urgency. Every sip brought not just warmth, but clarity and focus. She sat down at her cluttered kitchen table, the remnants of late-night notes and plans littered about. Analyses of the developer's previous projects were highlighted in yellow, each line a potential weapon against his power. As she rifled through her contacts, she knew today she would need to reach out to those who might have a clearer perspective on the developer and his methods, anyone who might understand the pitfalls of his intentions. The morning hours slipped through her fingers like grains of sand. Sarah felt that familiar tremor of doubt skitter across her mind. What if she uncovered something dire? It was a risk, and yet the thought of standing idly by felt even more daunting. She found herself standing taller, pumping herself up. Knowledge is power, she told herself, wrestling with the internal voice that whispered cynicism. You have every right to fight for what's yours. With that mantra echoing, she reached for her phone. Her first call was to Leo, a former employee of the developer who had left under dubious circumstances. If anyone could shed light on the reality behind his polished facade, it would be someone who had walked away from it. The phone rang, a dissonant sound against her thoughts. "Leo, it's Sarah," she said when he answered. She could hear the hesitation in his voice as he responded. "I know it's been a while, but I need your help. I want to know what I'm up against regarding the developer. What's he really like?" Silence hung briefly before Leo agreed. There was a raw honesty in his voice as he shared snippets of his experiences, the sway of power, and the shortcuts taken to achieve success. For every questionable tactic or underhanded maneuver he recounted, a new thread of determination wove itself into Sarah's courage. She wouldn't allow his tale to intimidate her. She would use it for reinforcement. After their call, she felt invigorated. She compiled the insights Leo had shared, tracing connections to the community that wrapped around the ranch. Equipped with this knowledge, she revisited her outreach letters, revising them with a tone of conviction shaped by Leo's revelations. She was no longer merely reacting, she was creating a compelling narrative that could inspire action. Meeting Mia later that afternoon, she laid out her findings, explaining how they could frame their argument not just around emotion, but around facts, hard evidence of the developer's history of deceit. She could feel a shared fire igniting between them, transforming fear into resolve. "I don't want our ranch to be just another statistic," Sarah asserted, each word gaining traction as they plotted their strategy. "Let's gather stories from everyone who has shared a moment here, everyone who has built their lives intertwined with the land." Mia nodded, the idea glowing in her eyes. The belief that they could turn weakness into strength began to grow in Sarah's heart. However, the looming shadows of doubt still lingered, whispering reminders of a potential failure that she would have to face sooner or later. That night she spent combing the internet, seeking more information about the developer's other projects, searching for patterns, uncovering hidden truths. The deeper she delved, the clearer it became that there was much more at stake than she initially thought. Someone was always watching from the fringes, waiting to exploit uncertainty and division. With each finding, Sarah's resolve solidified. Friction grew within her, a simmering urge to confront the developer before he made his next move. She sighed, contemplative, staring blankly at the screen, pondering the upcoming battle. The time had come to face the darkness lurking behind the developer's charisma, to wield her newfound knowledge like armor. Yet the next step held profound implications. What if digging deeper revealed something that could turn her world upside down? As uncertainty coalesced with excitement, Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself for the imminent storm. Tomorrow would demand even more courage. She knew she was on the precipice of a revelation that might very well shake the foundations of her fight. Was she prepared to confront whatever truths lay hidden? The stakes had never felt so high, and Sarah realized she had entered a game where every move could either save her or destroy everything she loved. The blue sky stretched overhead as Sarah stood at the window, surveying the vast expanse of her ranch. The fading sun painted streaks of orange and purple across the horizon, but the beauty felt muted against the impending tension. Her heart raced, fueled by the reality that today she would confront more than just the developer's ambitions. She would face her deepest insecurities. She took a moment to breathe, feeling the lingering effects of last night's research weigh heavily on her mind. She had pieced together more than just data. She had uncovered patterns and connections that revealed a systematic method of exploitation in the developer's projects. The sense of vulnerability surged anew. Who was she to stand against someone who had decimated entire communities without remorse? Determination tugged at her, reminding her why she needed to fight. She had something to protect, the land, the memories woven into its fabric. Strengthened by her resolve, she grabbed her notepad and outlined key points to discuss with Mia. One final revision of their strategy could bolster their presentation, making it sharper and more persuasive. As the clock ticked closer to their meeting, anticipation transformed into anxiety. Images of the developer's confident strides filled her mind, casting shadows over her newfound courage. She couldn't allow herself to waver. The stakes were too high. Gripping the edge of her kitchen table, she reminded herself of her purpose. The ranch wasn't just land. It was a part of her identity and her children's future. Mia arrived punctually, her eyes alight with eagerness.
"I can feel the tension in the air," she said with a slight grin, though Sarah detected a touch of concern underlying her enthusiasm. "We need to be prepared for the worst. If we give him an opening, he'll take it. We have to be ironclad," Sarah asserted, pacing now, her fingers nervously tracing patterns on the notepad. "We'll focus on his past, expose the ways he manipulates and destroys for profit." Mia nodded, the fire in her eyes sparking recognition of their shared goal. "Let's hold a community meeting tomorrow. We'll invite everyone impacted, gather their stories. We'll build a collective narrative that he can't disregard." As they planned, Sarah felt energy flowing, pulling her out of the mind's confines of doubt. This was her moment of change, the feeling that maybe she could harness her fear and mold it into resilience. The idea of turning individual vulnerability into a unified strength electrified her. "We should document everything," Sarah continued, her voice rising with excitement. "Each story, each loss and triumph. This is not just about us, it's about everyone who has been marginalized." Mia's eyes widened and she grinned. "You're right. We'll weave them together and it'll be undeniable." But amidst their spirited planning, a nagging thought wormed its way back into Sarah's mind. What if this blowback brought her family into the crossfire? The last thing she wanted was for her children to suffer because of her fight. Pushing the thought aside, she concentrated on the task, determined not to lose momentum. Yet a sinking sensation remained, a reminder of the underlying risks. Every step forward came with consequences, the burden of which threatened to crush her resolve at its core. The next day dawned with a cluster of nerves and excitement. As people began to gather for the community meeting, Sarah's heart raced with palpable trepidation. What if this effort become an exposed weapon against her? Determined, she summoned her inner strength, steeling her posture. A sudden hush fell over the crowd, eyes turning towards her, an unspoken anticipation hanging thick in the air. The moment had arrived. Could she hold their attention and channel their collective pain into action? As she took her deep breath and stepped forward, ready to ignite that spark within others, a flicker of fear emerged. The range of stories needed to emerge, and with them the truth would ride alongside their hopes for a future free of exploitation. But what if those truths cut deeper than she anticipated? With uncertainty hanging heavily, she faced the crowd, knowing her next words could either sink or elevate their cause. Would she find the courage to be a beacon in the storm, or would the very act of speaking unravel her resolve? The sun cast long shadows as Sarah took her first step into the spotlight, teetering on the edge of transformation. Sarah stood silently at the front of the room, her voice almost trapped in her throat as she faced the expectant crowd.
Sun filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with her frigid anxiety. A pulse of hesitation rippled through her. What if her words failed to resonate? What if they left her standing there, exposed and vulnerable, with nothing but silence meeting her call for justice? As she cleared her throat, she locked eyes with Mia, who gave her an encouraging nod. That brief connection grounded her. Sarah visualized the land she fought for, the laughter of her children playing beneath the mighty oaks. She felt their presence fill her with strength, transforming her fear into a harnessed energy. "Hello, everyone." Her voice quivered but gained steadiness as she continued. "Thank you for being here today. We all share a bond to this place, to this land that holds our stories." She saw nods of recognition. She wasn't alone. The weight of collective hardship united them in a way that was both daunting and empowering. Memories of those who felt the sting of loss flickered in her mind, fueling her determination. "We are here to confront what threatens our future and our way of life," she stated, her voice gaining volume and authority. "The developers' promises are built on past actions, actions that have forgotten the lives they destroy." As she spoke, Sarah felt her own trepidation begin to dissolve. Words poured from her with fluidity, revealing not only statistics but poignant stories. Each anecdote from the crowd reinforced her resolve. People who lost homes, farms, and community ties. They filled the air with their anger, sorrow, and resolve, and in their collective testimony, Sarah found a rhythm, a kind of rising tide of emotion. Yet with every step deeper into the conversation, a shadow lurked in the corners of her mind. The downside of this vulnerability. What if the developer retaliated, targeting her family, putting those she loved in danger? Was she prepared to shoulder the repercussions? Each story she shared rekindled the weight of uncertainty that threatened to suffocate her momentum. When the meeting concluded, the room buzzed with newfound camaraderie, a shared drive igniting the air around them. Sarah stepped back, her chest tightening. What's next? She thought. There was no turning back now. They had unearthed truths, but the real battle loomed ahead. Mia approached her, shimmering with enthusiasm. "That was incredible! You connected with them, Sarah! You have to keep this going!" But behind Mia's excitement, worry lurked. What were they in for? "I spoke from the heart," Sarah replied, her own voice an echo of confusion. "But we're playing with fire. This fight, it could cost our families everything." Mia hesitated, the spark in her eyes dimming momentarily before reigniting. "No matter the outcome, we can't let fear silence us."
Sarah felt a wave of admiration wash over her. Mia possessed qualities she envied: unwavering resolve and an instinct to confront adversity. What if she too could embody that strength, evolve it into her defense? As they left the meeting space, something stirred within Sarah. Maybe
this was less about fighting against the developer and more about standing for something greater. It could transform her lingering insecurities into authenticity, emboldening her to forge the path ahead. But the night that followed was restless, her mind battling the day's revelations. She mulled over strategies, plotted counterpoints, but doubts resurfaced like unwelcome ghosts. What if her conviction didn't hold against the developer's power? What if her family bore the brunt of her fight? Lying in bed, she gripped her pillow tightly. She knew she had to confront the developer eventually. Would that confrontation be their undoing or the catalyst for a decisive change? Her resolve flickered, exhilaration battling trepidation. Tomorrow would demand action, and she could feel the weight of decisions stretching before her. The time had come to face him, the shadow of the threat looming over her family. Before sleep finally claimed her, one question clawed at her determination. Would her burgeoning courage overshadow her deepest fears? Or would the confrontation expose fractures too deep to mend? The day had finally arrived. Sarah stood at the threshold of the developer's office, her heart pounding like a drumbeat of resolve. This meeting was not merely a defense of her land, it was a declaration of her transformation. Gone was the tentative widow weighed down by grief. Today, she assumed the role of a formidable advocate, a woman clear in her purpose. Her fingers danced anxiously across the slick surface of her notes, but she steadied herself with each breath. The community's stories and her own journey fueled her determination. She recalled their shared pain, the power of their voices that had risen together in unity, reminding her she was not alone. Stepping through the glass doors, she steeled herself. The game had changed. Today, she intended to reclaim not just her property, but her entire identity. Inside, the office buzzed with sleek professionalism, a stark contrast to the warmth of her community. The developer, a polished figure seated behind a massive oak desk, looked up as she entered, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Sarah, what a surprise," he drawled, his condescension palpable. "Here to discuss your quaint little ranch again?" "I'm here to discuss a lot more than that," she replied, her voice steady despite the unease rippling through her. This was her moment to showcase the strength forged through vulnerability. As they engaged in dialogue, she presented the research she had painstakingly gathered. Documented cases of his corporate practices, affected families, and exposed promises turned hollow. Each point communicated not just facts, but a resonance of collective burden, fortifying her stance. Her conviction surged. She had moved from fear to advocacy. Yet he countered with arguments steeped in skepticism, dismissing her findings as mere emotion-driven anecdotes. Sarah felt the walls close in, a familiar sense of doubt creeping beneath her armor. But then she recalled the faces of those who had shared their stories with her, faces filled with hope and defiance. "This isn't about emotion," she declared powerfully, leaning. "It's about accountability. We deserve to live and thrive on this land, not merely be collateral damage for profit margins." His smirk faltered. Calculations crossed his face as she lodged her truths under the scrupulous lens of scrutiny. She recognized the doubt beginning to plant seeds of uncertainty in his mind. This moment was pivotal, and the stakes had never been higher. "You're a stubborn one, I'll give you that," he grumbled, but she sensed the edge in his tone. She was winning. "I'm not just stubborn, I'm resolute," she replied, her voice cutting through the tension. You underestimate the strength of community. We'll fight back together, and I'm not afraid to expose what you are." With each assertion, she felt the weight lift, unveiling the power of her transformation. No longer did she stand as a widow overwhelmed by circumstance. She embodied an advocate prepared to protect her dreams. As they concluded, she knew she had delivered her message resolutely. Although the path forward remained fraught with challenges, Sarah felt an exhilarating sense of autonomy surge within her, a far cry from the woman who once cowered beneath her grief. When she left the office, the skies reflected her internal shift, bright and open, promising. She had conquered her fears and reclaimed her narrative, but the battle was still ongoing. Alongside her community, they solidified alliances, fortified connections, and grew their numbers around shared ambitions. Yet, amidst this newfound dynamism, Sarah realized that her true victory lay not only in resisting the developer, but in discovering her intrinsic worth. Weeks enveloped into a productive rhythm, and as her neighborly alliances flourished, she could see the impact of her efforts. The collective bond they forged was more powerful than any property deed. Conversations sparked, children laughed freely, and purpose reigned as they rallied to fortify their claim to the land. Days turned into weeks, and soon she organized a community gathering to unite their voices. Under the stars that filled the night sky, she spoke, and this time it felt different. Not just passion, but purpose and acknowledgement of her place within a tapestry of resilience. "Together we are powerful," she declared, her voice cutting through the night air, reflecting her unwavering growth. "Let's protect what we hold dear and turn our dreams into reality." The hearty cheers enveloped her like an embrace, resonating with the support of both her children and her neighbors, their belief in her solid and unwavering. Beaming with a sense of fulfilled identity, she reflected on the woman she had become. The transition from despair to advocacy culminated in a remarkable transformation. Sarah had conquered not just the shadows of her past, but an emerging future brimming with promise. As newfound confidence coursed through her, she stood tall, proud to claim her legacy and prepare her family for their brighter tomorrow. This was only the beginning of a longer journey, one where she could finally thrive, guide her children, and shepherd the community she cherished so deeply. In reclaiming her life, she had proven that real strength lies not solely in standing against storms, but in the courage to embrace the journey forth. You need to subscribe now to follow Sarah's inspiring journey as she overcomes new challenges. Leave a like now to support her powerful story and keep the momentum going. Comment your thoughts and share your interpretations of her remarkable transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need encouragement to take charge of their own lives. Don't wait even one more second to take action and spread the inspiration.